It was a beautiful
I
day,
stand
the
before you
kind of day
tonight
Clara had
realizing
dreamed
that
about for
every
years.
choice,
The sun
every
shone brightly,
sacrifice
the flowers
led me
were in full
exactly to
bloom,
this moment.
and everything was perfect for her wedding. Clara stood in front of the mirror, looking at herself in the stunning white gown. She smiled at the reflection, feeling like a princess. Today, she was marrying the love of her life, Ethan, and nothing could go wrong. She felt on top of the world. Caroline, her mother, stood nearby, adjusting the veil in Clara's hair. Caroline was proud of her daughter, of course, but she was also a little emotional. She'd raised Clara on her own, doing everything she could to give her the best life possible. The wedding was a huge deal for both of them. It wasn't just about the ceremony, it was about celebrating all the hard work, sacrifices, and love they had shared over the years. Clara was the center of attention, and she loved every second of it. She had always been a bit spoiled, growing up with a mother who worked so hard to give her everything she wanted. But today, everything was supposed to be perfect. Caroline smiled, trying to hide the bittersweet feeling in her heart. She had given her daughter everything, but Clara didn't always appreciate it. Still, this was her day, and Caroline would do whatever it took to make it special. The ceremony went off without a hitch. Clara walked down the aisle, her heart racing, and Ethan waited at the altar, looking as handsome as ever. It was magical. The vows were exchanged, the rings were placed, and everyone cheered. Clara and Ethan were finally married. The crowd clapped and cheered, but Caroline stood at the back, watching it all unfold. She wasn't the center of attention, but she didn't mind. This was Clara's moment. After the ceremony, everyone moved to the reception hall. The venue was beautiful, a place Caroline had chosen herself. She had invested in it years ago, using her savings. It was something she'd kept secret from Clara, not wanting to take away from her daughter's happiness. But she had done it for Clara, hoping it would make this day even more special. The venue was large, with elegant chandeliers hanging from the ceiling, tables decorated with flowers, and a large dance floor. It was the perfect setting for a grand celebration. As the guests filled the room, the mood was light, and laughter echoed throughout the space. Clara and Ethan greeted their guests with smiles and warm hugs. Caroline watched from a distance, happy to see her daughter so happy, but something started to feel off. She couldn't pinpoint it exactly, but there was a tension in the air. She pushed the feeling aside, telling herself it was just nerves. After all, this was a huge day for Clara, and she was probably just feeling overwhelmed. As the evening went on, the speeches began. Friends and family took turns at the microphone, sharing stories about the couple and wishing them the best for the future. When Ethan's best man stood up to speak, everyone turned their attention to him. He was funny and charming, just like Ethan, and the crowd laughed at his jokes. Then, Ethan stood up to give his speech. Clara smiled at him, her eyes full of love. Caroline stood near the back of the room, trying to enjoy the moment, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Ethan began speaking about how excited he was to marry Clara, but his words weren't coming across as heartfelt as they should have been. He made a few jokes that were funny at first, but then his tone shifted. Caroline frowned as she listened closely. "Wow, Clara really looks amazing today," Ethan said, his voice loud and clear. "But I have to say, that dress your mom is wearing?" He paused for effect, looking around at the guests. "I mean, I thought she was going to a funeral, not a wedding." The room went quiet for a moment. Caroline felt her heart sink. At first, she wasn't sure if she'd heard him right. Did he really just say that? She glanced at Clara, hoping she would say something, but Clara was smiling, as if she didn't think anything was wrong. Ethan's words were meant to be a joke, but they stung. Caroline had spent a long time choosing her dress, making sure it was elegant but understated. She didn't want to outshine Clara on her big day. Yet here was Ethan, mocking her in front of everyone. The guests laughed, and Caroline felt her face burn. She wanted to laugh along, to brush it off like it was nothing, but the hurt was too real. She had been nothing but kind to Ethan, treating him like family since he and Clara started dating. But now he was making her feel small, like she didn't belong. Caroline stood up, her heart pounding in her chest. She had to say something. She couldn't just sit there and let him get away with this. She took a deep breath, trying to keep her voice steady. "That's enough, Ethan," she said firmly, her voice carrying across the room. "Show some respect." But instead of apologizing, Ethan just smirked. "What's the matter, Mom? Can't take a joke." He laughed, and the guests joined in. Caroline's face reddened, and for a moment, she didn't know what to do. This wasn't the man her daughter had fallen in love with. This was someone who had no regard for her feelings, and it stung. Just as Caroline was about to say something else, Clara stood up from her seat. She looked furious, her face flushed with anger. "Mom, you're ruining my day," she yelled, her voice sharp and cutting. "Get out." Caroline froze. She had always been there for Clara, supporting her through everything. But now, her daughter was siding with Ethan, the man who had humiliated her. Clara's words felt like a slap in the face. How could she do this to her mother, the one person who had always been there? The guests were silent now, watching the scene unfold. Caroline could feel all eyes on her, but she didn't care anymore. Her heart was breaking, and she couldn't stay another second. She turned and walked out of the room, her tears welling up, but she didn't let them fall. She didn't want anyone to see her cry, especially not Clara and Ethan. As she walked out of the venue, the cool evening air hit her face, and she finally allowed herself to breathe. Her heart was heavy with disappointment. She had done everything for Clara, given everything she had. And now, here she was, cast aside like she didn't matter. Caroline knew that she couldn't let this go. She wasn't sure what she was going to do yet, but one thing was certain. This wasn't over. And Ethan and Clara had no idea what was coming next. Caroline drove away from the wedding reception, her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. The night air was cold, but it didn't help to calm her nerves. She couldn't stop replaying the events in her mind. The mockery, the laughter, and Clara's words. "You're ruining my day, get out." The words echoed in her head, each repetition feeling like a fresh stab to her heart. Her chest tightened, and she had to swallow the lump in her throat. She had always done everything for Clara. From the day she was born, Caroline had been a single mother, working long hours just to provide for her. She had raised Clara with love and care, making sure she never felt like she was missing out, even though Caroline had to sacrifice so much. She had given Clara everything she could afford: good schools, a nice home, even a big wedding day. But now it felt like all of that meant nothing. Clara had never truly understood the hard work behind everything Caroline had done. She had always been the center of attention, never realizing how much her mother had to struggle just to give her those things. Caroline had tried to give her daughter a perfect life, but now, in this moment, she felt like everything had fallen apart. The drive home felt like it took hours, though it was only a short distance. Caroline tried to stay focused on the road, but her thoughts kept drifting back to the wedding. The way Ethan had mocked her in front of everyone, the way Clara had yelled at her, telling her to leave. Everything was still fresh in her mind. She had never imagined that her daughter, the girl she had loved and sacrificed for, would treat her like that. As Caroline pulled into her driveway, she cut the engine and sat in the car for a moment. She was exhausted, emotionally, physically, and mentally. But she couldn't just let this go. Clara's reaction hurt more than anything Ethan could have said. Clara was the one person who should have stood by her, no matter what. And yet, she had sided with her new husband, dismissing her mother's feelings like they didn't matter. Caroline sighed, wiping a tear from her cheek. She was tired of being the one who always gave in, the one who always made sacrifices. Today had shown her that she was invisible to Clara when it mattered most. The hurt was still too raw for Caroline to think clearly, but one thing was certain. She was done being the one who always took the back seat. She needed to do something. She needed to make them realize the consequences of their actions, the disrespect they had shown her. It wasn't just about revenge, it was about teaching them a lesson. They needed to understand the value of respect and the price of taking someone for granted. Caroline wasn't going to let this go, and she wasn't going to allow Clara and Ethan to get away with it. As she sat in her car, the thought hit her like a sudden wave: the wedding venue. Caroline had secretly owned the venue for years. It had been an investment she had made long ago, using her savings. At the time, she had done it as a way to secure some financial stability for herself. But it was also a gift for Clara. Caroline had known that one day her daughter would get married, and she wanted to make sure she could give her the perfect wedding. She didn't tell Clara about the venue ownership, not because she wanted to keep it a secret, but because she didn't want her daughter to feel like it was something she owed her. Clara had no idea that her mother was the one who owned the venue. Caroline had kept it hidden, allowing Clara to focus on planning the wedding without any distractions. But now, as the sting of Clara's words and actions still burned, Caroline realized that this secret could work to her advantage. The penalty clause. Caroline remembered the contract she had signed when she invested in the venue. It had been carefully written, and buried deep within it was a clause that Caroline could activate under certain conditions. The clause was meant to protect the venue from clients who were disruptive or disrespectful. It was meant to prevent situations like the one that had just unfolded, where a guest or a family member caused a scene or made the event uncomfortable. Caroline could use it now, but she knew that doing so would have consequences. The penalty clause would force Clara and Ethan to pay for every last detail of the wedding, from the food to the decorations, even the chairs. It would be an enormous financial burden for them, and that was exactly what they needed to understand. Caroline didn't feel good about it. She had never wanted to cause harm, but today was different. She had been humiliated in front of everyone, and Clara had turned on her. This wasn't just a simple disagreement. It was about respect. Caroline had worked so hard to provide everything for Clara, and now it was time to teach them both a lesson. The next morning, Caroline called the venue manager. Her heart pounded as she explained the situation, asking them to activate the penalty clause. The manager was hesitant at first, but after Caroline explained the circumstances, they agreed. It was done. The penalty clause would go into effect, and Clara and Ethan would be required to pay for every last chair, every plate of food, every glass of champagne. It would be a huge sum, more than they could afford, but Caroline didn't care. She wasn't doing this for the money. She was doing it to make sure Clara and Ethan learned the value of respect. Later that day, Clara and Ethan were at home, still reeling from the events of the wedding. They hadn't spoken to Caroline since she left the reception. Clara had tried to call her mother, but Caroline had ignored the call. Ethan was upset, but he had no idea just how serious things were about to get. The knock on the door startled them both. When Clara opened it, a courier handed her a large envelope. Clara's heart skipped a beat as she saw the name of the venue on the front. She opened it, her hands shaking. Inside, there was a legal document. The penalty clause had been activated. "What is this?" Ethan asked, his voice filled with confusion. Clara's face drained of color as she read the details. The penalty was enormous, far beyond what they could afford. It wasn't just a small fine. It was a full payment for everything associated with the wedding. Every last expense was now their responsibility. Ethan's face twisted with frustration. "This is ridiculous," he yelled, throwing the papers down. Why would she do this? Clara didn't have an answer. She was too stunned to speak. How could her mother have done this? She thought about the events of the wedding, the laughter, Ethan's mocking comments, and then her own words, telling her mother to leave. She had never thought it would lead to something like this. But it had. And now, Clara and Ethan were left to deal with the fallout. They had no idea what Caroline was thinking, but it was clear that this wasn't over. The lesson Caroline was trying to teach them would be a painful one, and they were about to pay the price for their actions. Clara sank down onto the couch, holding her head in her hands. She had no idea what to do. Ethan stood beside her, looking lost. They had made a terrible mistake, and now they would have to face the consequences. The morning after the wedding, the tension between Clara and Ethan was thick in the air. Neither of them had slept well.
But it was my
Clara
life.
had stayed awake most of the night, her mind racing with thoughts of what had happened. The mockery from Ethan, the humiliation from her mother, and then her own outburst. It was all playing over and over in her head. Ethan, too, was feeling the weight of the situation. He hadn't meant to embarrass Caroline, but now, looking back, he realized how poorly he had acted. He hadn't expected things to spiral so far out of control. Ethan sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through his phone, trying to distract himself. Clara was on the couch, staring blankly at the TV, not really paying attention to what was on. She was still in shock, trying to process everything. The wedding had been a dream, a fairy tale come true, until it wasn't. Now, everything felt like a nightmare. It was then that the doorbell rang, breaking the silence. Clara wasn't sure if she should answer it. But before she could get up, Ethan stood and walked to the door. When he opened it, a courier stood there holding a large envelope. The courier handed it to Ethan, who took it with a confused look on his face. "What's this?" Ethan asked, as he looked down at the envelope. The words "legal notice" were printed on the outside in bold letters. "I don't know," the courier replied before walking away, leaving Ethan standing in the doorway, holding the mysterious envelope. Clara walked over to him, her curiosity piqued. "Who's it from?" she asked, reaching for the envelope. Ethan handed it to her, and she tore it open. As she began to read, her face drained of color. The words blurred for a moment, but she could still make out the most important part. Penalty clause activated. The letter was from the venue where they had held their wedding reception. It stated that due to the behavior of certain individuals at the event, specifically the groom's inappropriate remarks and the disruptive nature of the event, Caroline, the owner of the venue, had activated a penalty clause in the contract. The penalty was for every aspect of the wedding: food, chairs, decorations, even the music and lighting. The total cost was astronomical, far more than Clara and Ethan could ever afford. "What the hell is this?" Ethan said, his voice rising. "Why is Caroline doing this? What did we do to her?" Clara's hands were shaking as she read the rest of the letter. She had no idea her mother owned the venue. It had never come up before. She had always assumed they rented it from someone else, never questioning the details. But now the truth hit her hard. Caroline had been the one behind everything, quietly pulling the strings from the shadows. She had no idea how to react. A flood of emotions rushed over her: shock, disbelief, confusion. How could Caroline do this? Why hadn't she said anything before? Clara had always assumed her mother was just a simple woman, working hard to support them, doing her best for the family. But now, it seemed like there was so much more going on beneath the surface that Clara had never known about. Clara turned to Ethan, her voice trembling. "Mom owns the venue. She's been hiding it from me all these years. She's using this penalty clause against us. We have to pay for everything, Ethan. Everything." Ethan was silent for a moment, trying to process what Clara was saying. His expression shifted from anger to disbelief. "Wait a minute. Your mother owns the venue? Why didn't she tell us?" "I don't know," Clara said, her eyes filled with frustration. "She didn't want us to know. She wanted to make sure that everything went smoothly for my wedding, I guess. But this is too much." Ethan threw his hands up in the air. "This is insane. We're talking about thousands of dollars. There's no way we can afford this. We'll be in debt for years." Clara bit her lip, trying to hold back the tears. "I know," she whispered. "I can't believe it. And I can't believe how she's doing this after everything we've been through. I thought she was on my side." Ethan's frustration grew. "This isn't just about the money, Clara. It's about respect. Your mom humiliated us both at the wedding, and now she's using this penalty clause as a way to get back at us. She's treating us like we don't matter." Clara felt her anger rising. Ethan was right. It wasn't just about the money. It was about respect, and Caroline's decision to punish them in this way felt like a personal attack. But Clara also knew that they had both played a part in the events that led to this point. They had both made mistakes at the wedding. Ethan's mocking comments and Clara's cold response to her mother's hurt feelings. They had both failed to show the respect Caroline deserved. Clara couldn't help but feel guilty. She had pushed her mother away, not realizing how much she had taken her for granted. Now, she was dealing with the consequences of her actions. "What are we going to do?" Ethan asked, his voice laced with worry. Clara stood up, walking toward the window, her eyes scanning the street outside. "I don't know," she said softly. "I don't know how we're going to fix this, Ethan. But we have to try." Ethan paced back and forth. "I'm going to talk to your mom. I'll make her see reason. She can't just do this to us." Clara shook her head. "I don't think it's that simple. She's hurt, Ethan. We hurt her, and now she's hurt us back. She doesn't trust us anymore." Ethan stopped pacing and turned to face her. "I don't get it. You're telling me that your mother, who's been nothing but kind to us, is doing this to punish us? Is this really the same person?" Clara paused. "I think she's doing this because she wants us to understand what we've done. She wants us to learn respect. And maybe we do need to learn that lesson. But this punishment is extreme. I don't know if we can come back from this." Ethan stared at her, his face showing signs of frustration and confusion. He had no idea how to fix the mess they were in. He had never been in a situation like this before, and he didn't know how to deal with Caroline's hidden power. Clara took a deep breath. "I'm going to call her. I have to. Maybe if I apologize, really apologize, she'll understand. Maybe she'll reconsider." Ethan gave a short, frustrated nod, but he didn't say anything. He wasn't sure if apologizing would be enough to fix things, but he knew that Clara was right about one thing. They needed to try. As Clara picked up the phone, she felt a heavy weight on her chest. She didn't know what to say to her mother, or if her mother would even listen. But this was the only chance they had to make things right. She dialed Caroline's number and waited for the call to connect. "Mom," Clara said when the phone picked up, her voice small. "I know we haven't talked since yesterday, but I need to apologize for what happened at the wedding. I never meant for things to go so far. I'm sorry. Please, can we talk?" There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then Caroline's voice came through, cold and distant. Clara, I've made my decision. I'm not going to change my mind. I'm doing this because you need to learn a lesson. You both need to learn respect.
When
Clara's
I look back
heart
at that
sank.
moment, I realized
She had
how much
hoped for a
courage
softer
it took.
response,
We didn't
but
know
Caroline
the
wasn't
outcome, but we
backing
knew
down.
we had to try.
The punishment was
And it
set,
made all the difference.
and there was nothing they could do to change it. I understand, Mom, Clara whispered. But please don't do this to us. Please don't make us pay for everything. Caroline's voice softened just a little. You don't understand, Clara. But maybe you will one day. Respect isn't something you can take for granted. The line went silent again, and Clara knew that this wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about something deeper. Something she wasn't ready to admit. But the lesson was clear. Caroline wasn't going to let them off the hook. And now, they had to deal with the consequences of their actions. The days after Caroline's call felt like a heavy fog over Clara and Ethan. Clara kept replaying her mother's words in her mind. You need to learn a lesson. No matter how hard she tried to push it away, those words stuck with her. The realization that her mother had been quietly holding so much power in the background hit her harder than anything else. Not only did Caroline own the venue, but she had also set things in motion that neither Clara nor Ethan could undo. The penalty clause. It was more than just a fine. It was a devastating amount of money that would cripple them financially. The truth was hard to swallow. Clara had grown up thinking that she and her mother were on the same side. But now, everything had changed. Her mother was treating her like a stranger, and Clara didn't know how to fix things. Ethan was no help either. He had his own pride to deal with. Every time he thought about Caroline, his anger flared. He had never been a fan of the way she treated him. Always distant, always guarded. But now, after the wedding incident and the penalty, he felt like he was being punished for something he didn't even fully understand. He wasn't sure whether to be angry with Caroline or with Clara for not stopping her mother from doing something so extreme. Clara spent most of her days at home, staring at the legal documents. She wasn't sure how she was going to explain it to Ethan's family, or worse, her own. The embarrassment was overwhelming. She had never imagined something like this could happen, not in a million years. One evening, after a long day of worrying and planning, Clara sat down with Ethan to talk. He was pacing around the living room, clearly frustrated. I don't get it, Clara. Why is your mom doing this? I thought we were family. I thought she liked me, Ethan said, his voice tense. But now, it feels like she's trying to destroy us. Clara sighed deeply, rubbing her eyes. It's not about liking you, Ethan. She's not doing this to hurt us. At least, not in the way we think. It's about teaching us a lesson in respect. Ethan stopped pacing and turned to face her. Respect? That's what this is all about. Yes, Clara replied quietly. I think it is. You remember how the wedding went, right? The jokes you made about my mom's dress, and how I just stood there and let it happen. I didn't defend her. I didn't stand up for her. And then when she tried to speak up, I just told her to leave. I didn't care. I was more focused on the wedding and what everyone else thought. But my mom, she didn't want to just let it go. She wanted us to understand how much we hurt her. Ethan's expression softened, but only slightly. I see what you're saying, but I still don't understand why she had to hit us where it hurts. The penalty clause isn't about teaching respect. It's just cruel. I don't know, Clara whispered, her voice cracking. Maybe it's both. Maybe she had to show us how serious it was. She's been pushed aside for so long, Ethan. She's never been the center of attention, and now, when we have the chance to make things right, we're ignoring her. We took her for granted. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, thinking for a moment. So what now? Are we just supposed to accept this punishment and move on? What kind of life are we going to have if we pay for all of this? Clara's eyes filled with tears. I don't know, Ethan. I really don't. But what I do know is that we have to try to fix this. If we don't, we'll lose my mom for good. And I don't want that. Ethan finally sat down beside her, pulling her close. I'll do whatever it takes to make things right. But this isn't just about money, Clara. It's about rebuilding trust. It's about showing your mom that we truly understand what we've done. The next morning, Clara woke up with a plan. She needed to talk to her mother. There was no other way. The situation was out of control, but she still had a chance to make it right. She needed to show Caroline that she had learned her lesson, that she understood the weight of her actions, and how deeply she had hurt her mother. It wasn't going to be easy, but Clara was willing to try. After a long, tense breakfast with Ethan, Clara picked up the phone and dialed her mother's number. It rang 3 times before Caroline picked up. Hello. Caroline's voice was cold, but Clara could hear the exhaustion in it. Mom, it's Clara, she said softly. I need to talk to you. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Caroline didn't speak right away, and Clara wondered if her mother was even going to agree to the conversation. But finally, Caroline spoke. I'm listening, she said, her voice guarded. Clara took a deep breath. I know I hurt you, Mom. I know I took you for granted, and I know that the way I treated you at the wedding was wrong. I didn't defend you. I let Ethan say those things about your dress, and I didn't stop him. I shouldn't have done that. I should have stood up for you. Caroline didn't respond right away, and Clara thought for a moment that her mother had hung up. But then Caroline spoke, her voice low and controlled. Clara, what you did hurt me more than you realize. And I've spent a long time thinking about it. I didn't want to hurt you or Ethan with the penalty. But sometimes people need to understand what they've done. I wanted you to learn that respect isn't something you can just take for granted. Clara's heart dropped as she listened. I understand, Mom. And I'm sorry. I've been selfish. I didn't realize how much I had hurt you until now. I didn't see what you've been doing for me all these years. And I'm so sorry that I treated you like you didn't matter. There was a pause before Caroline spoke again. It's not just about the money or the wedding, Clara. It's about making sure you never forget the importance of respect. You need to respect yourself and others, especially the people who love you. I know, Mom, Clara said, her voice breaking. I promise you, I'll never forget this lesson. I'll do whatever it takes to make it right. There was another long silence, but this time, it wasn't uncomfortable. Caroline finally spoke, her voice softer than before. I hope you do, Clara. And maybe one day, you'll understand why I had to do this. I just wanted you to see things from my perspective. Clara nodded, even though her mother couldn't see her. I do understand, Mom. And I'm sorry. I don't want to lose you. Caroline sighed. You won't lose me, Clara. But this isn't something that can be fixed overnight. You'll have to show me that you've truly learned from this. I will, Clara promised, her voice filled with determination. After hanging up the phone, Clara felt a weight lift off her shoulders. It wasn't over, but it was a start. She knew she had a long road ahead of her, and the road to repairing her relationship with her mother wouldn't be easy. But she also knew that she had learned an important lesson. That respect isn't something that can be taken for granted, and sometimes you have to pay a price to truly understand the value of those around you. The lesson Caroline had taught her was hard, but Clara was ready to do whatever it took to make things right. And maybe, just maybe, they could rebuild what had been broken.